Hello, my name is Jennifer Ramba, and I am a UNESCO Fellow for the George Washington University, working in Bangkok, Thailand for the summer of 2016. An integral part of the UNESCO Fellows program is the blogging experience about our work environment and our research. And when I heard about this piece of the program, I thought that I might want to put a different spin on it and make it a more interactive experience for those back home. When I thought about what my life was like in Washington, D.C., constantly on the go, I thought that instead of writing a blog, I might make it a podcast instead. So there is a biography about me on the website if you have managed to look around, but my focus has been gender equality in education. And I'm really good at getting into the middle of things and getting things done quickly, which is what my first week at UNESCO Bangkok was like. So I should begin by saying that I'm working in the Inclusive Quality Education Unit within the UNESCO Bangkok office on a team that is dedicated to basic quality education. And I work as one of only 2 interns within my unit, and it sounds like each team within the unit is pretty close-knit, although it sounds as though maybe the entire office is rather close-knit. When I arrived on Monday, my team was preparing for a training that would be held later in the week. And originally, I thought that I would be hanging back at the office and kind of observing from afar, but that's not really my style, and that isn't really what they needed from me. So on my first day, on Monday afternoon, in a planning meeting, I was able actually to walk away with 1.5, I would say, sizable projects for the training. So the training that my team was hosting was the second meeting in what will undoubtedly be many more over the course of a 5-year program that is aimed at increasing gender responsiveness in teacher education within the Asia-Pacific region. We hosted participants from 5 countries in the region: Cambodia, Nepal, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, and Uzbekistan. And the participants were either UNESCO field office staff from that country, Ministry of Education officials, curriculum planners, teacher educators, and there was also a smattering of technical experts within the field of teacher education, including textbook writing. And the goal of the training was to pilot and get feedback on 5 different survey assessment tools that had been designed by my former unit chief, who is now a retired consultant for UNESCO. The tools that were designed were to help each country evaluate gender dynamics in the classroom, curriculum development in teacher education institutions, textbook writing, and teaching and learning materials. And the feedback that the participants would give us would help my team to determine if the tools were comprehensive, well-structured, and feasible to be used within the individual country contexts. So the training was a wonderful success. And over the course of 3 days, we received feedback on all 5 tools, which I'm currently in the process of codifying. And the group was able to really come to a consensus about what the outcomes of the program should look like, as well as develop their own country plans for carrying out a gender assessment on gender responsiveness within teacher education in their own countries. So my projects coming out of my first afternoon were first to develop a gallery walk exercise. We wanted to create an icebreaker activity that would get the participants thinking about not just gender equality, but the concepts that we wanted to talk about. So we had developed 4 different themes with a question for each theme and gave out Post-its to the participants and created 4 different stations in the ballroom that we were working in, and had them walk around and answer the questions to the best of their ability. Some of the questions were things like, how does gender play a role in the dynamics of a classroom when considering teacher-student interactions? Another would be, how does gender play a role in creating learning and teaching materials and in textbook writing? We had also asked the participants to just introduce themselves to one another, because while some of them had met before, many of these people were new and had not come to the previous meeting. So we wanted to make sure that there was a camaraderie in the room. The other project was to help one of my associates to develop a pre-survey for the participants, so that the participants could not only take it and give us an understanding of their knowledge about gender-based terminology and how that relates to development and education, but also so that they could take it back to their countries and use it with those that they were working with as well. Questions in this survey asked about definitions regarding gender equality, gender parity, gender mainstreaming, but also looked at the Sustainable Development Goals that are specifically aimed at education and at gender equality. We had also asked about barriers to education for girls in developing countries. We had also asked questions about whether or not there were national policies on gender equality for these individual countries. And it seems like the feedback from these surveys was pretty varied. We had gotten a lot of ministry officials that had said, yes, we do have a policy on national gender equality, and I've read it. Actually, quite a few were well read in it, it seems. And we had a lot that were able to successfully identify gender-based terminology, but we had a sort of disconnect between identifying the gender terminology and being able to apply the barriers to development and gender and education to the two ideas. So one of the questions, for example, asked, what barriers are there for young girls when considering secondary education? And I listed four that were very obvious barriers to education for young girls: childhood marriage, the rising cost of school fees, and so the priority given to boys in the family, in addition to the necessity to help out at home. And then I offered an all of the above answer. And many, in fact, wrote in none instead of taking that all of the above answer, which was rather surprising to me. So after looking through the pre-survey questions, we are thinking that we might want to go back and redevelop some of these questions so that they're broader in nature and not necessarily trying to trick the respondent into choosing the answer we think that they should choose. So in my conversations with friends and family back home, when I had been telling them about what my first week had been like at UNESCO, I had been explaining to them that we'd been working on this gender responsiveness and teacher education workshop. And I got a lot of, but what does gender responsiveness even mean, Jen? I don't understand. So one of the things that I had really gotten involved with in my graduate education is looking at what quality education really means and what does inclusive quality education really mean. And I came across a definition that I felt was pretty powerful. Duncan Wilson had given a definition in a paper that he'd put out, Human Rights, Promoting Gender Equality in and Through Education. And he had defined gender equality in education as a three-pronged process. There are rights to education, rights within education, and rights through education. So the right to education, we can all agree, is a universal human right. It's declared in the UNESCO Constitution as well. Rights to education is just about getting access to education. But rights within education is where it starts to get a little bit tricky. So boys and girls, even in the United States, can all attend school, right? So we'll look at the United States as an option. But when you look at the education that boys and girls both receive in a U.S. public school, for example, it's not the same. Much the same way we talk about the achievement gap. We have a gender gap. The education that my brother would receive was different than I would receive. And there's a lot of things that play into that. And so gender responsiveness is just looking at what are the things that play into that. Can we look at how a classroom is organized to better foster a better relationship between the genders? Can we do more in creating more positive role models that are women? Can we do more to create more examples that are women? Can we do more to promote STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, with women, with girls, and they're especially in the primary age? Is there more that we can do in using positive examples of women and girls and stories using science, technology, engineering, and mathematics? I'm just going to call it STEM from now on. So is there more that we can do there? Is there also more that we can do to have the teacher look at their own actions? Now, we're not saying anyone is particularly programmed to act this way, but if you recognize, where are you putting boys versus girls in your classroom? Are you allowing girls an opportunity to speak out in the same manner that you would allow boys to speak out? A lot of times when a boy, especially in the elementary age, speaks out, there's a lot of, oh, well, boys will be boys. And that mentality, when telling a girl who is of similar age to be more of a goody two-shoes, or to be more polite, or to be more ladylike, and that does not mean speaking out, that sends her a message that what she's doing is wrong, but what he's doing is fine. And that's not equal. That's not the same experience. That's not the message we want to send. So we want to look at, how do teachers in their pre-service, meaning when they're becoming teachers, how do they learn about seeking out a gender-responsive classroom? Additionally, it's not enough just to train teachers well in the pre-service. There are continuing education requirements in almost every developed country in the world for teachers. And so it's also important that we look at, what are in-service teacher education institutions doing? What are public school systems doing to further those messages? That we need to make sure we're sending the same messages. We're not saying to go too far down one road on gender equality. It's not only about girls. It is about both, and it is about the relationship between both. So that's my little rant about gender responsiveness within education. I think that the gender responsiveness workshop that we did actually really helped to drive home the concepts for our participants. Many of them came in extremely well read in gender equality, and it took a very long time, I think, for the global community to come to a point where we can say gender equality is a priority and it does need to have a focal point. And now it's really refreshing to see more educated men standing up and saying that it is more about a relationship between the genders. And then maybe from that point we can start to look at moving beyond the binary of male-female. But I guess that's a little ahead of the game, I guess, and maybe for a different, certainly for a different internship, but maybe for a different podcast as well. So my first week at UNESCO Bangkok was complete. I had 6.5 hours of audio feedback to sift through. I wanted to participate in the conversation as well, so I recorded everything. And I was very happy to see so many passionate educators and government officials coming together just to talk about what gender responsiveness means in education, especially for pre-service teachers. I think that a lot of times we think of it like a very top-down. I'm certainly used to working from the ground up, but it was nice to see kind of a mix, having people from the ground level at the teacher education institutions with policymakers in the same room at the same table having the same conversation. So moving forward, I'm going to be continuing to apply the feedback that we got to adapt our pre-survey and get it back out to our participants. But I'm also going to start looking at my research project. And my research project will be looking at how multilateral organizations such as UNESCO and the World Bank, how are they able to help a particular country create and implement policy working toward gender equality in education? Does UNESCO help? Does it hurt? Is it a facilitator of a discussion? What is the multilateral organization's role here, and what impact does it have? So I'm going to do that. I'm in the midst of a very in-depth literature review that is pretty hard to get through with 14 hours a day with the workshop. So thankfully, now that that's over, I can actually get down to reading. I hope to have another podcast up in the next week or so talking about some of the other projects that I'll be working on. There's 2 or 3 more, including work with the UNGEI, which is the United Nations Girls Education Initiative. And there's an e-learning course that I'll be tweaking, it sounds like, along the way as well, but I'm not sure what that looks like just yet. So I leave you here at a solid 15 minutes. Until next time, you can reach me if you need to at Jen Romba, that's JenRomba, the number 1, at gwmail.gwu.edu. Until next time, so long.